The SEAL commander thought it would be a harmless joke when he asked the quiet woman in the back of the briefing room to show her credentials. But less than 3 minutes later, a phone on the wall rang. A 3-letter agency demanded to speak with him immediately, and every Navy SEAL in the room would realize they had just watched their commander accidentally challenge someone whose authority reached far beyond their entire command. The Naval Special Warfare Training Compound along the Virginia coast was loud that morning, the kind of controlled chaos that only existed inside elite military units where confidence ran high and reputations were forged in salt water and gunpowder. Operators moved through the building carrying gear bags, helmets clipped to their belts, the faint smell of ocean spray and gun oil clinging to everything. Inside one of the tactical briefing rooms, a group of veteran SEALs filled the seats around a long steel table, their voices low but relaxed after finishing a brutal dawn training exercise. At the head of the table stood Commander Nathan Cole, a hard-edged officer with a reputation for two things: exceptional leadership in combat and a sharp sense of humor that could cut through a room like a knife. His sleeves were rolled perfectly, a trident pinned proudly on his chest, and he spoke with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his career in places that never appeared on maps. The room quieted as he began flipping through a stack of mission planning slides projected on the wall. Today's briefing was supposed to be routine, preparation for a joint operation somewhere in Eastern Europe, but the mood shifted slightly when several of the operators noticed someone sitting near the back wall. She hadn't been there earlier. She wasn't in uniform either. The woman sat quietly in a chair against the wall, legs crossed calmly, a small notebook resting in her lap. She wore a dark jacket and simple civilian clothes that stood out sharply in a room filled with camouflage and tactical gear. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her expression remained composed as she watched the discussion unfold. To most of the SEALs, she looked like another visiting analyst from Washington, someone sent to observe operational culture, or read a classified report that would gather dust on a shelf. It happened more often than people thought. Command liked oversight. Operators tolerated it. Commander Cole noticed her about 10 minutes into the briefing. He paused mid-sentence, one eyebrow rising slightly as he studied the unfamiliar face. A small grin formed, the kind his team had learned usually meant someone was about to become the subject of a joke. "Hold up a second," he said, setting the briefing remote down on the table. The operators leaned back casually in their chairs, sensing the shift in tone. Cole turned slightly and gestured toward the woman. "I don't believe we've met," he said in a relaxed voice that carried easily across the room. A few heads turned. Several SEALs followed his gaze and noticed her for the first time. She looked up slowly, calm and completely unbothered by subtly becoming the focus of attention. "Just observing," she said politely. Her voice was quiet but steady. Cole chuckled lightly, folding his arms. "Observing, huh?" he repeated. A couple of the operators smirked. They had seen this before, visiting civilians sitting in on sensitive discussions until someone asked the obvious question. "Well, ma'am," Cole continued with a friendly but unmistakably teasing tone, "this isn't exactly a public seminar. Tier 1 operational briefings usually require some kind of clearance." The room filled with low amusement. No one sensed tension yet. The woman simply nodded once. "I understand." Cole tilted his head, still smiling. "Then you probably also understand why I'm going to ask the obvious question." He tapped the table once with a knuckle. "Credentials." The word landed lightly, almost playfully. One of the SEAL chiefs leaned back in his chair watching the exchange with quiet interest. The woman didn't immediately respond. Instead, she studied the commander for a moment, as if carefully measuring the tone of the room. Around her the operators waited, some mildly curious, others barely paying attention anymore. Finally she spoke again. "Commander," she said calmly, "are you sure you want to do this here?" The question caused a small ripple of confusion around the table. Cole laughed softly, assuming she meant the attention. "Relax," he replied, waving a hand. "This is a friendly crowd." A few of the SEALs chuckled. The woman's expression didn't change. "Very well," she said simply. She reached slowly into the inside pocket of her jacket, as if about to retrieve an ID card. But before she could pull anything out, the sharp electronic ring of a wall-mounted phone cut through the room. The sound was unexpected enough that several operators turned instinctively toward it. The communications petty officer near the door picked up the receiver. "Up center," he answered casually. His posture stiffened almost instantly. The color drained slightly from his face. "Yes, sir, one moment." The petty officer slowly lowered the receiver from his ear and looked across the room directly at Commander Cole. "Sir, the call is for you." Cole sighed lightly, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "If this is about drone scheduling again," he muttered as he walked over and grabbed the phone. "Commander Cole speaking." There was silence for 2 seconds. Then his posture changed. The relaxed confidence vanished from his face like someone had flipped a switch. The operators noticed immediately. Cole's jaw tightened. "Yes, Director," he said quietly. The room went still. Every SEAL in that briefing room knew that tone. The tone of someone speaking to a superior far above their normal chain of command. Cole's eyes slowly drifted toward the woman standing near the wall as the voice on the other end of the line continued speaking. "Understood," he said finally. When he placed the phone back into its cradle, the joking atmosphere that had filled the room moments earlier had completely disappeared. Commander Cole turned slowly toward the woman. For the first time since the briefing started, the smile was gone. And suddenly, every operator in that room realized something had just gone very, very wrong. The room stayed frozen after the phone call, the kind of heavy silence that experienced operators recognized immediately. The moment when something routine had just turned into something far above their pay grade. Commander Cole stood beside the wall phone for a second longer than necessary, staring at it, as if confirming what he had just heard. Only a minute earlier he had been joking, casually asking a quiet civilian woman to show her credentials in front of his entire SEAL team. Now the relaxed confidence that usually filled the briefing room had disappeared completely. Slowly he turned back toward the long table where the operators sat watching him. Their curiosity was obvious, but Cole's eyes didn't land on them first. They landed on the woman standing near the wall, calm and composed exactly as she had been when the teasing began. He cleared his throat once, regaining control of the room. "All right," he said quietly, his tone noticeably different now. "Let's reset for a moment." Several SEALs shifted in their chairs, sensing the change immediately. Cole walked back toward the center of the room and stopped a few feet from the woman. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he straightened slightly, the way an officer does when addressing someone whose authority might not be obvious but is clearly significant. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "it appears I may have misunderstood the nature of your visit." That alone caused a few operators to exchange quick glances. Their commander rarely admitted mistakes, especially not this quickly. The woman calmly closed the small notebook she had been holding and stepped forward so the entire room could see her clearly. Even without a uniform, there was something unmistakably controlled about the way she carried herself. Calm, steady, and completely unfazed by a room full of elite special operators. Cole turned slightly, so his voice carried across the briefing room. "For the record," he said, "our guest here is not a visiting analyst from the Pentagon." The operators leaned forward slightly. Cole paused for half a second before continuing. "She's here on behalf of a federal intelligence agency." The sentence landed heavily in the room. Someone in the back quietly muttered, "Which one?" Cole answered without taking his eyes off the woman. "The one that just called my phone." A ripple of realization moved across several faces. When certain agencies called a field commander directly, it meant something serious was happening. The woman finally spoke again, her voice calm and even. "Commander," she said, "I appreciate the enthusiasm your team brings to its briefings." A faint smile touched her lips. "Though I usually prefer not to become the center of them." A few of the SEALs shifted slightly, realizing how the earlier joke now looked. Cole nodded once. "Understood, ma'am." He gestured politely toward the table. "Would you like to address the team?" The woman studied the room for a moment, her eyes moving across the operators who had spent their careers working in the shadows of global conflicts. None of them looked amused anymore. "My name is Elena Ward," she said. "Some of you may have heard rumors about an intelligence network operating in the Black Sea region." Several operators exchanged looks. They had heard those rumors. Information pipelines that seemed almost impossible. Enemy movements predicted days before they happened. But no one ever knew where that intelligence came from. Ward continued calmly. "That network exists because someone built it." She paused briefly. "I did." The room went completely silent. Commander Cole folded his hands behind his back, now standing slightly to the side, like an observer rather than the center of the briefing. The playful commander from earlier was gone. Ward glanced around the table again. Your unit has been selected for a mission that depends entirely on that network. One of the senior chiefs leaned forward slowly. Meaning what exactly? Ma'am. Ward met his gaze. Meaning every operation your team has run in that region for the last 6 years began with intelligence that originated from my office. The scale of that statement hung in the air. Cole spoke again, his tone respectful now. And the call? Ward looked at him calmly. That was my director, she replied. Making sure I arrived safely. The implication landed instantly. Cole nodded slowly, absorbing it. Ward placed her notebook gently on the table and looked around the room one last time. Good, she said quietly. Because the mission we're about to discuss, she paused, letting the tension settle over the operators, is going to be the most dangerous one any of you have ever run. The room stayed silent for several seconds after Elena Ward finished speaking, the kind of silence that only happens when a group of highly trained operators realizes they've just stepped into something far bigger than they expected. Around the table, the SEALs exchanged quiet looks, the teasing energy from earlier completely gone now. Commander Cole studied her carefully, replaying the last few minutes in his head. The joke, the request for credentials, the phone call from a director who clearly outranked most of the military chain of command. Finally, he gave a small nod, the expression on his face somewhere between respect and reluctant admiration. Well, he said quietly, that explains the phone call. A few operators allowed themselves faint smiles, the tension easing slightly. Ward didn't react much, but there was a trace of amusement in her eyes. She opened her notebook again and flipped it to a page filled with carefully written notes and coordinates. Commander, she said calmly, the reason I'm here is simple. The network my office built has identified an operation forming along the Black Sea coast. If it launches successfully, it could destabilize half the region within weeks. The room sharpened instantly. This was the language SEAL teams understood. Clear threats, clear missions. One of the senior chiefs leaned forward with his arms on the table. And you need us to stop it. Ward nodded once. Your team is the only unit positioned to do it quickly enough. Cole walked slowly back toward the head of the table and looked around at his operators, men who had followed him through some of the hardest missions of their careers. Every face was focused now. Ready. He turned back to Ward. Then I guess we're done joking for the day. A quiet ripple of agreement moved through the room. Ward closed her notebook. Good, she said. Then she added one final sentence that made every operator in the room lean forward slightly. Because the people behind this operation already know you're coming. Cole raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a problem. Ward met his gaze calmly. It would be, she said, if they also knew I was here. A few SEALs exchanged impressed looks. Commander Cole allowed himself the smallest smile. All right, he said, picking up the briefing remote again. Let's get to work. And just like that, the joke that had started the morning was forgotten, replaced by something far more serious. A mission that would soon prove exactly why a 3-letter agency had called the moment their commander asked the wrong woman for her credentials.